This great tree of life with its many branches didn't just appear out of nowhere. There are reasons why we have so many different species in the environment, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
Welcome, students and curious minds alike. My name's Tarek, and today we're going to talk about speciation. As we saw in previous lessons, living organisms are constantly changing, and new species are being created all the time. If you don't know what a species is, we have a lesson about that here on the channel. Go check it out. But the process of creating a new species is called speciation, and it's not always the same all the time. There are several ways this can happen. So, in this lesson, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this happens in nature. First, we can divide the processes of speciation into two main groups, those that happen through cladogenesis and those that happen through anagenesis. Simply put, the ones that happen through cladogenesis are when one species can turn into two or more species, sometimes even keeping the ancestral species as a current species, which increases the total number of species in the environment. Was that hard to understand? Remember that example with the snake that I gave? In the lesson about examples of evolution, that's a good example of how cladogenesis happens, since the mainland snake is still alive. And there's a new species, which is the island snake. Now, anagenesis happens when one species transforms into another species, but the original species disappears. In other words, the total number of species doesn't increase, it stays the same. An example of this, which I also gave in the other lesson, is the example of the whale. But for either of these two ways of new species emerging to happen, they have to face some kind of challenge so they can adapt. Because logically, if the environment always stays the same, no new species will ever appear. So we can say that for a new species to emerge, there must be some environmental change, which we call models of speciation. So let's talk about them. We have speciation, allopatric speciation, which is divided into two types. Vicariant speciation, which is when something separates the population into two distinct environments with no contact between them, like the formation of a mountain or the appearance of a very large river, or even the separation of the continents during Pangea. Since this population will be split, and each group will face different environmental pressures, evolution will happen differently for each one. If this goes on for a long time, the populations will become so different that they might turn into two separate species and won't be able to reproduce with each other anymore, even if they meet again in the future. And still, within allopatric speciation, we have the peripatric type, which happens in the same way as before, with a separation in the population, but this time the population is split into a much smaller portion and a much larger portion. This type of speciation mainly happens in cases of colonization of islands or forest fragments, which are much smaller than the main area, meaning the continent or the forest. Because of this, we also call this the founder effect. Another type of model is parapatric speciation. In this case, there isn't a complete separation of the population. A separation occurs where individuals from the populations can still have some contact, meaning they can occasionally reproduce. In the same way, this separation will force each population to evolve differently, but hybridization does occur between them. Finally, we have the sympatric speciation model, which is a bit more complicated. Here, there isn't a physical change in the environment. The separation between populations happens due to ecological niche differences. Some individuals in a population end up specializing in eating a different type of food or occupying a different area within the same environment. That way, they eventually end up splitting into two entirely different populations, even though they're not physically separated from each other. This kind of thing actually happens quite a lot with pollinating insects that specialize in certain types of flowers, like Darwin's moth. Of course, none of this can happen without mutations and adaptations to the new environment they're occupying. But if everything goes well, new species should arise through the models I mentioned earlier. We also have to mention that it's not just the models that are important for the processes of speciation, but also the mechanisms that can cause speciation within each of these models. So I'm going to quickly go over them for you. What are these mechanisms that can occur? And I'll give a brief description of each one. The first is reproductive isolation, which is a mechanism that considers that modifications occur during the mating of species. These can be prezygotic modifications, meaning they make mating more difficult through mutations that physically prevent individuals from reproducing, such as changes in the fertility period or physical changes in the sexual organs, and so on. Or postzygotic, when fertilization does occur, but the hybrid individual between the two populations is not able to reproduce. Or mating happens and the offspring is a hybrid. It doesn't even get born. We also have genetic isolation mechanisms, which will cause changes in the genes of individuals so that one can no longer mate with the other. This can happen abruptly or even due to physical space issues, making genetic interaction between individuals more difficult. In other words, after all this, we can say that speciation processes are divided into cladogenesis or anagenesis. And the main models for speciation are the speciation types: allopatric, which can be vicariant or parapatric, the parapatric model, and the sympatric model. And within each of these models, we can highlight the mechanisms of reproductive isolation: prezygotic reproductive isolation, postzygotic reproductive isolation, or even genetic isolation. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and share, and remember that we have a new video every week, so subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to always get the latest updates. Thank you so much.